в западных элитах очень сильно желание заморозить существующее положение, несправедливое положение вещей в международных делах. Они привыкли столетиями набивать брюхо человеческой плотью, а карманы деньгами. Но они должны понять, что бал вампиров заканчивается.
This is my video update on this Wednesday, midday, March the 13th. Let's talk about some news. And let's start things off with Putin's interview to Russia One TV, RIA Novosti. And this is his interview right before the elections, which take place on the 15th up until the 17th of March. And Putin spoke with Russian journalist Dmitry Kiselyov. And Putin said some very interesting things in this interview, which was about an hour and a half, I believe, long. And he did say some very interesting things, as Putin always says some very interesting things when he gives interviews. And I'm going to summarize some of the interesting points that Putin made in this interview. He said that Russia is ready for peace. Russia is always ready for peace in this conflict, proxy war with Ukraine. But Putin said that Russia is not going to talk peace just because Thank you. I will be safe. Thank you. What was I saying? Yes, Putin said that Russia is ready for peace, but it's not going to negotiate with Ukraine. It's not going to hold peace talks just because the other side is running out of ammunition, which is an interesting statement. Russia is not going to sit down for peace talks just because Ukraine is running out of ammo. So I thought that was an interesting statement from Putin. Yesterday, I talked about some of the analysis that is talking about NATO troops in Ukraine. And some analysts are saying that what Macron is talking about and what Pavel of the Czech Republic is talking about with collective West troops or NATO troops in Ukraine is focused on getting those troops into Ukraine in order to relieve Ukraine soldiers from current duties that they're performing. For example, securing the border with Belarus. And if you can bring in collective West troops into Ukraine, then they could secure the border with Belarus, and that will free up the Ukrainian soldiers to be sent to the front line. I talked about this in my video yesterday, and sure enough, Putin mentioned this in his interview as well. He actually said that if this does happen, if this is one of the ideas, then Putin said that those troops, especially the troops from Poland, because we're speaking about France, the Baltic states, Poland, possibly the UK, those troops would not leave Ukraine, especially the Polish troops, Putin said. Quote, if Polish troops enter the territory of Ukraine in order to, as they say, secure the Ukrainian-Belarusian border, for example, or in some other places to free up Ukrainian rear military units to participate in hostilities on the front lines, then I think that Polish troops will never leave. I talked about this yesterday. Simplicius the thinker, he talked about these two ideas that Macron and Pavel have about sending troops to Ukraine, also to send them so that they can relieve Ukrainian soldiers with auxiliary tasks in the rear, and then you can send them to the front line. And Putin talks about this in his interview. He talked about this, and he said, yeah, they're not going to leave. That was an interesting statement from Putin. Putin also was asked about Macron and why Macron is talking the way he's talking, why he continues to push for escalation. And basically what Putin said is that Macron is pretty much upset. I was going to say a different word. But Macron is upset that France has been kicked out of Africa, and he's blaming Russia for that. And Putin was like, "Look, we didn't squeeze." I actually think the word he used was squeezed. He's like, "We didn't squeeze France out of Africa." He's like, "Look, whatever countries France was in Africa, they wanted France gone, and so France left. They couldn't stay any longer, and they got pushed out of Africa by the countries in Africa." He's like, as Russia, we didn't squeeze France out of anything in Africa, but Macron is blaming us, and he's hurt. That was the word that I was going to use. He's hurt. Yeah, that was an interesting statement from Putin, and he also said that the Baltic nations should stop talking so much smack. That was an interesting statement as well. He's like, look, the Baltic nations, they're talking a very tough, very big game, but just calm down, Baltic nations. Stop talking all of this nonsense. He was asked about Finland joining NATO, and he said that Russia had a very peaceful relationship with Finland. A lot of business was being conducted between Russia and Finland through the border, and now Putin said Finland is going to have a militarized Russia right next door to them. So yeah, they got into NATO, but look at everything that they lost. Business, trade, and now they're going to have a militarized Russia right next door to them. So good job, Finland. That's what Putin said with regards to Finland in NATO. And when he was asked about the U.S. nuclear war, U.S. troops in Ukraine, boots on the ground in Ukraine, Putin said that Russia is ready. He said that Russia is even ready for nuclear escalation. I mean, he said it's not going to happen. He's like, look, this is something that we don't want to happen, and we don't think it's going to get to that point. But the U.S. is talking about how they're ready for nuclear exchange. The collective West is talking about how they're ready for a nuclear exchange, and Putin's like, look, we're ready. As Russia, we are also ready, and we have better weapons. We have better weapons, he said. And he also said that if collective West, but I think he mentioned the U.S. in particular, he said if U.S. soldiers go to Ukraine, if you have boots on the ground in Ukraine from the U.S., Russia's just going to see them as enemy combatants in whatever role they take up. And he mentioned that, look, NATO's been in Ukraine since the Maidan coup. And since the Maidan coup, the NATO presence in Ukraine has been increasing. Every year it's been increasing, and he's like, look, NATO is there. Mercenaries are there. They're performing different functions. I think he said they're there as military advisors. But if you start to get more and more U.S. or NATO collective West troops in Ukraine, Russia's just going to see them as enemy combatants, and they're going to have to deal with it. They're going to have to deal with the consequences. What else? So many things that Putin said in this interview. He was asked about the U.S. elections, and Putin said that when Trump was president, he was actually a bit upset at the fact that it appeared that Putin wanted Biden to win the elections in 2020. And Putin actually said that Trump actually confronted Putin with that belief that Putin was actually pulling for Biden in 2020. Let's see what Putin said. He said, but what is curious is that in the last year of his work as president, Mr. Trump, today's presidential candidate, reproached me for sympathizing with Biden. That's what he told me in one of the conversations. Do you want Sleepy Joe to win? Question mark. Putin quoted Donald Trump as saying sometime back in 2020. And then, to my surprise, Trump, was persecuted because we allegedly supported him as a candidate. Well, it's complete nonsense, the Russian leader said. Yeah, he was like, it's so weird. On the one hand, Trump is coming to us and saying, hey, you support Sleepy Joe. That's the words that Putin used. You support Sleepy Joe. And then he's like, on the other hand, they're accusing us of supporting Trump. He's like, you can't win. You can't win. He didn't say that, but that was the impression that Putin was giving off. He's like, you just can't win when it comes to the U.S. or to the U.S. elections. He also said that the U.S. elections are becoming increasingly uncivilized. That's a direct quote. And finally, Putin was asked about Biden and his meetings with Biden when Biden was vice president. And Putin mentioned that when Biden went to Moscow to meet with Putin at some point in time when Biden was the VP for Obama, during that election cycle in Russia, Biden went to Moscow, and Putin told the interviewer that Biden threatened Putin that if he stood for elections again, then the U.S. would unleash an Arab Spring in Moscow. And Putin's reply to Biden during this interview, he's like, I told Biden to pretty much, F off. He didn't say that. I'm saying that, but that's pretty much what Putin said. He's like, I didn't care what the hell Biden was saying or the threats he was making to me. I was like, whatever, bro, just go away. He's like, that probably explains why Biden despises Putin so much, is because Putin didn't pay any attention to Biden's threats. So I imagine that probably upset Biden with his gangster mafia threats to Putin, and Putin was like, just buzz off, man. So that was the interview. A lot of interesting things said by Putin, on Biden, on Trump, on Ukraine, on all kinds of topics. On Macron, and let's talk about Macron. Boy, let's talk about Macron. I think this is the big story of the day, to be honest. But let me know what you think. I think this is a huge story. There's a publication in France called Marianne. I don't know this publication, but it got a report, a document, which explains. I don't know how they got this document, by the way, but this document allegedly explains why Macron is on the crazy train, why he is going absolutely crazy with his escalation with Russia. And this document is actually 3 assessments by the French military on Project Ukraine. And basically these 3 assessments, they paint a catastrophic picture of Project Ukraine. War in Ukraine, from prudence to panic. What hides the turn of Macron? This is Google translated from French to English, so the title may be a bit off. But Marianne publication, and it looks like this explains, or this may explain, why Macron is going crazy. So let me just read you. Let me just read you what's going on here, and you can let me know your thoughts. The reports, which have somehow found their way into the Weekly's possession, argue that Ukraine wrecked its Western-trained force in the failed 2023 offensive, has run out of men to mobilize, and that its recent loss in Avdiivka shows it can't even hold the line against Russia. So that's a summary of the three assessments from the French military. Let me get into a little bit more detail. Quote, Ukraine cannot win this war militarily, concludes the first report, written in the fall of 2023, following Kiev's disastrous ground offensive. It praises the Russian forces as the new tactical and technical standard of how to run defensive operations and debunks the media's myth of meat assaults. For the West to continue pursuing a military solution in Ukraine would be the most serious error of analysis and judgment, the classified document said, according to Marianne. Sending French troops to Ukraine would be unreasonable, one senior officer wrote. Make no mistake, up against the Russians, we are an army of cheerleaders, he added. That's the first assessment. We are an army of cheerleaders up against Russia, and the Russian military is basically the gold standard. That is what the first assessment pretty much says. Russian forces are the new tactical and technical standard of how to run defensive operations. It also debunks all of the meat assault, and Russians are sending troops in human waves and stuff like that. The first assessment says that's all fake news. That's assessment number one. Let's go to assessment number two. The second report, outlining the prospects for 2024, says that Kiev needs 35,000 men per month, but is recruiting less than half of that number, while Russia enlists 30,000 volunteers monthly. Meanwhile, the 2023 offensive tactically destroyed half of Kiev's 12 combat brigades. The West can provide 3D printers to manufacture drones or loitering munitions, but will never be able to print men, the report said. One solution it advised was sending Western troops to Ukraine to carry out support tasks in the rear, freeing the Ukrainians for frontline duty. The second report also acknowledged the Western Special Forces and soldiers in civilian clothes had a far greater presence in Ukraine than officially acknowledged, including quite a few British, as well as French naval commandos training the Ukrainians. So now we know, according to Marianne publication, where Macron is getting his idea about sending Western troops to Ukraine. Because the second assessment is basically saying that Ukraine is running out of soldiers. You can make drones, you can make loitering munitions, you can even provide weapons and ammunition to a certain point, but you can't print men. That is what this report said. And one of the ideas it throws out there, the second report, is look, Ukraine is running out of men. It's being demilitarized. So one thing that we can do is we can send French soldiers to Ukraine. And those French soldiers can perform the tasks that I've been talking about, that I talked about yesterday, that I talked about in the beginning of this interview, that Putin talked about in the interview he gave yesterday. They can perform these tasks to free up the Ukrainian soldiers so that they can be sent to the front line. So what happens when those Ukrainian soldiers, if and when those Ukrainian soldiers are freed up and they go to the front line and they're also annihilated? Then what? Then what happens? Do you send the French soldiers then to the front line? So the third report, and the third and the latest report, which had the French observers in a cold sweat, described the Battle of Avdiivka as a possible rout of Ukrainian forces. It described how Russia created hell for the Ukrainian troops by using massive glide bombs to inflict more than 1,000 casualties per day. The French document also described the Ukrainian retreat on February the 17th as sudden and unprepared. So that's the document. the three assessments, the document that Marianne publication obtained. How they obtained this document, don't know. Someone must have given them this document, but I think that explains Emmanuel Macron, and that explains Pavel and the Baltic states and all of this rhetoric and discussion about sending troops to Ukraine and freeing up Ukrainian forces and all of this stuff. The bottom line, the truth is that Russia is just annihilating Ukraine, and it's annihilating um, NATO, this NATO proxy. It's clearly winning this NATO proxy war, and basically the only hand that the West has to play, the only real option that they have left at this moment in time, is to send troops into Ukraine and to try and relieve Ukrainian forces from other duties so that they can be sent to the front line. But what do you do when those Ukrainian forces are destroyed? You free up Ukrainian forces in the north. You free up Ukrainian forces from whatever they're doing in the rear, and then what? Russia's going to grind through those Ukrainian forces as well. Then what do you do, Macron? Do you send the French military to fight the Russians? Because this assessment says that the French military are just a bunch of cheerleaders compared to the Russians. That's the word it uses, cheerleaders compared to the Russians. So that is the big news. I think this is a big story. So Ukraine, what it did yesterday is that it tried to invade Russia. That is what the Ukraine military, that is what the Zelensky regime tried to do yesterday. A botched military incursion into Belgorod and Kursk. No military strategic significance whatsoever. This was a cheap and costly military PR stunt that most likely Zelensky wanted to do right before the Russian elections, because in his little green head, he thinks that if they can pull off some sort of an incursion to Belgorod and maybe occupy a village for like an hour or plant a Ukrainian flag on Russian territory, then it's going to hurt or damage Putin before the elections. That's exactly why they performed this stunt, and boy, did it backfire. We are talking backfired in a major way. From what I understand, Ukraine sent 2 battalions into Belgorod and Kursk, and they got obliterated. I mean, obliterated. And even the Russian Ministry of Defense, they put out videos and photos. They put out a statement as well, and they say just in Belgorod, what they can count, just in Belgorod was 60 Ukrainian soldiers were killed. Just tanks and vehicles demolished, destroyed, and that's just what they can count. We don't know what the official numbers are once all of this is said and done, but right off the bat, the Russian Ministry of Defense is like, look, we just obliterated 60 Ukrainian soldiers right off the bat. And that's just in the Belgorod direction. We're not talking about Kursk, and there's all types of tanks that are burning. And this was a complete and utter failure. A PR stunt. A PR stunt. And it backfired in a major way. So, good to see that the Zelensky regime is using the U.S. money wisely. He's using all the money from the United States in order to engage in these military PR operations, which serve zero strategic significance with regards to the actual conflict in Ukraine. That's what he's using the money sent from the collective West to do these things. And he's losing men, and he's losing weapons and tanks. For what? For what purpose? So he can score a PR victory, so that he can try to fool the Ukrainian people and the collective West into thinking that they're winning this war, they've accomplished something. That was big news yesterday. This failed incursion into Belgorod and into Kursk. So the U.S., they managed to find $400 million to send to Ukraine. Don't you love it when that happens? When you say you have no money and then out of the blue you just manage to find a couple million under those sofa cushions. Yeah, so yeah, they found 400 million, from one of these slush funds or drawdown funds or whatever they call it. Yeah, they found 400 million. They're going to send it to Ukraine in the form of weapons. And the big announcement is that Ukraine is going to be getting a whole bunch of ATACMS. I'm not exactly sure the quantity of ATACMS, but they're going to be getting the ATACMS, more ATACMS. So that's the big announcement there. And the EU is going to be sending $3 billion in interest to Ukraine by July. This is from the 200 billion that the Brussels-based Euroclear is freezing. They've seized and they've freezed the 200 billion in Russian assets, and the interest that this is accumulating is going to be sent to Ukraine. It's just awaiting the approval from the Commission in July, and then this money is going to be sent to the Zelensky regime. Theft. It's just theft. You have an asset that is accruing interest, and that interest is going to be stolen from you. That interest is Russia's money. But they're going to take that interest and they're going to send it to Project Ukraine as they try to figure out a way to actually steal the 200 billion. And they can't quite figure that one out just yet. But we are getting reports from Reuters, and they are citing EU officials who are saying that when and if the 200 billion in Russian frozen assets are stolen and sent to Ukraine, they will also have to allocate a significant amount of money to fight an onslaught of court cases that are going to be directed at Euroclear. And it's the EU basically acknowledging that once this money is stolen and sent to Ukraine, there's going to be all kinds of legal issues and all kinds of court cases that are going to be directed at the European Union and at Euroclear, because what's going to happen, according to Reuters, is that the EU is going to steal the money, the Russian frozen assets, send them to the Zelensky regime. Then Russia is going to retaliate, and they're going to see something like 33 billion in European assets that are in Russia. Not only that, Russia's going to also speak with, one second here, with assets that are being held in Hong Kong and Dubai. They're going to also move to seize assets, or try to find ways to seize assets being held in Hong Kong and Dubai as well. And you're going to have all kinds of Western banks and businesses and God knows what else who are going to basically go after Euroclear and the European Union. And so they're going to have to fight these court cases. You're also going to have Russia going after Euroclear and the EU. So they're going to actually have to allocate a whole bunch of money to fight all the court cases, which is going to stem from the theft of the Russian frozen assets. This is such a bad idea. I can't believe they're still considering this. I can't believe they're going to actually go through with this, because they want to go through with this. And everything is just signaling that this is about the dumbest, stupidest thing that the European Union can do. But it's like they can't stop themselves. Then there's no one to pull them back and to tell them, no, don't do this. Don't you see all of the terrible things that are going to happen once you steal these frozen assets? But they can't stop. They can't stop. And even Switzerland is getting in on the Russian frozen asset theft. Switzerland has more than 8 billion of Russian state reserves frozen in its financial institutions. And the country's parliament last week voted 21-19 with 3 abstentions in favor of a series of motions authorizing the government to work on creating a reparations mechanism under international law. A reparations mechanism, that's what Switzerland is calling it, huh? So Switzerland is looking to steal 8 billion in Russian frozen assets and send it to the Zelensky regime. Russia strongly condemns this step by the Swiss authorities, which grossly violates the fundamental principles and norms of international law regarding state immunity. The Russian Foreign Ministry said in a statement, warning that any encroachment on Russian state property under the guise of any far-fetched reparations mechanism would be nothing more than theft at the state level. Switzerland, what are you doing, Switzerland? What are you doing? Why? Why are you doing this? You're not part of NATO. You're not part of the EU. You don't have to do this. You don't have to destroy, ruin your reputation, which is already kind of shaky. Your financial reputation. Why do you want to destroy your financial reputation? Why? For the little green man in Kiev? Really? Really, Switzerland? Oh my God. Oh boy. So let's do a few more stories and then we'll work our way towards today's clown world. Romania's president, Iohannis, he has announced that he will be seeking the top position as Secretary General of NATO. He's going to challenge Mark Rutte. Interesting development. It's official that Trump is going to be the GOP candidate. He just has to wait for the convention, but he's passed the threshold of electors, of votes that are needed to be the GOP candidate. Biden has also passed that threshold. So it's kind of semi-official. We're going to wait for the conventions to take place. But Trump against Biden. Special counsel Robert Hur, he testified to Congress yesterday, and he defended his decision not to indict Professor Biden. Very handsome man. He's such a handsome man. He's so dreamy. Biden is so dreamy. Anyway, he defended his decision not to indict Biden, despite finding evidence that Biden had stashed away a whole bunch of classified documents in 2017 in his garage next to his Corvette. Dreamy, handsome Biden driving in a Corvette. Dreamy, handsome Biden in his Corvette. Winking at the ladies. He's so handsome, Biden. Anyway, he had the documents stashed in his garage, next to his Corvette, in his home, and in his university office. He's also a professor, by the way. He's also Professor Biden at the University of Pennsylvania. And he had all these documents stashed all over the place. But Robert Hur, he defended his decision not to indict Biden. And the reason he didn't indict Biden is because Biden is, he's there's nothing left there anymore up here. Nothing left. And Matt Gaetz, he took issue with Hur's decision to not go after Biden. The special counsel insisted that he didn't find enough evidence of Biden's intent to prove his guilt beyond a reasonable doubt to a jury. Gaetz replied, but the reason you have that doubt is the senile cooperator theory, the fact that Joe Biden is so inept in responding that you can't prove the intent. He added that it's frustrating when former President Donald Trump is being prosecuted for mishandling of classified documents while Biden is being treated differently because the elevator is not going to the top floor. That is a direct quote from Matt Gaetz. Robert Hur is not indicting Biden because there's nothing left upstairs. And that was the point that Matt Gaetz was making. And it is absolutely spot on. Matt Gaetz is absolutely correct. in the point that he's making. And Biden the other day, he called Orban a dictator, or he said Orban wants to be a dictator, or he's looking to create a dictatorship. Orban stated flatly that he doesn't think democracy works. He's looking for dictatorship, Biden said in a speech in Pennsylvania last week. Please stop, Biden. Stop with the dictator word. Stop. Stop, stop, stop. Sullivan, Blinken, the whole team around Biden, just stop with the dictator stuff. It's just getting old. It's getting old. It's getting ridiculous. And you're making the United States look foolish. It really is making the U.S. government look ridiculous. Everyone is a freaking dictator. Everyone's a dictator. Everyone. Xi's a dictator. Putin's a dictator. Orban has won 5 elections. Free and fair elections. Internationally recognized. And you're going to tell me he's a dictator? Or he wants to be a dictator? So look, the foreign minister, Peter Siasto, he was going to have none of this dictator rhetoric, none of this nonsense, and he actually challenged the United States to provide the receipts. Siasto, he told the United States, you show me a speech, a transcript, where Orban said that he wants to be a dictator, or he wants to create a dictatorship. And the U.S. couldn't provide the receipts. They actually called in the U.S. ambassador in Hungary, in Budapest, and they said, show us where in one of Orban's speech or statements he said he's going to create a dictatorship. The ambassador had nothing. We asked the ambassador to show us the quote with the place and date where the prime minister has said what the president of the United States attributed to him. Obviously, no such statement was made, so we could receive no substantive response, the foreign minister said. Budapest was not obliged to tolerate such lies from anyone, even if that person happens to be the president of the United States of America, Siarto said. And they summoned the ambassador in Budapest to the foreign ministry. And that's what they told him. Even if you are the United States of America, we're not going to take this dictator crap from you. Well said, Foreign Minister Peter Siarto. All right, let's do a clown world, and let's talk about Macron. Well, Medvedev talking about Macron. So Medvedev, he put out a post on Twitter X in French on Macron and why Macron has been canceling his trips to Kiev. He was supposed to go to Kiev a couple of days ago. That got canceled. And then it was said that he was going to go to Kiev in the next week or two. And now it looks like he's going to cancel that trip as well. And Medvedev, well, he sounded off on Macron's cancellations to go to Kiev and to see Zelensky and to get a whiff of that Zelensky number 5. And here is what Medvedev posted on Twitter X. And this is Google Translate. It was in, the original post was in French, but let me read you the Google translated Medvedev post. Macron preparing to go to Kiev, but he's a zoological coward. Anyway, I recommend to his office to take several pairs of boxer shorts. It will smell very strong. P.S. I wrote this morning and didn't have time to publish it. And in the evening, he had already pooped on himself. Poor France. I got nothing. I can't say anything to top that. Medvedev, man. Oh, boy. What to make of Medvedev's tweets, of his posts. Oh, boy. Macron pooped on himself is what Medvedev is saying because he's scared to travel to Kiev. He keeps on canceling his trips to Kiev. Poor France, Medvedev says. Anyway, that's what Medvedev posted about Macron. What else? Stoltenberg, he replied to the Pope's white flag negotiation statement, and he said that Ukraine needs weapons, not white flags. Very clever stuff. Ukraine needs weapons, not white flags. Boy, the Pope comment really irked them, didn't it? It really got under their skin, the collective West. It really got under the collective West's skin, what the Pope said. Just called for negotiations, that's it. I mean, my God, they really went crazy over what the Pope said. Anyway, that's the video, everybody. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, Telegram, Rockfin, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop. Pick up a bomber jacket. Pick up a long sleeve t-shirt. Or pick up some limited edition St. Patrick's Day t-shirts as well. Take care.